Proud. Okay, we are live on recording, so thank you everyone who's joined us. So we have a code of conduct, which is just basically designed to make sure that all of our interactions are pleasant and everyone is treated with respect and kindness. So we do have the link for that in the agenda. If you haven't looked at it before, please do spend a moment or two reading through that. And the other thing is, if at any point you feel like there is some problem or something that behavior that isn't in line with our code of conduct, then you can contact myself, or if there's an issue that maybe I'm involved with, then also Daniela, who is another of the team members in InterMine, is quite happy to take reports regarding that if required, but hopefully everything will be fantastic today. So we have two speakers today. And of these two speakers, the first one will be Jason Williams, who is, let me see if I can get this right. You are an assistant director at Cold Spring Harbor, and you are a recent NSF competition winner, but I think you'll tell us a bit about this. And you also have founded the lifescitrainers.org, which I'm really actually quite excited to hear about.
Awesome, it all sounds correct. Thanks, Yo, for the invitation. One thing I wasn't sure from our discussion, I guess I was planning to take about 10 minutes or so. I don't know what you said. I just want to make sure I'm not.
That is fabulous.
Okay. It'll really end up being 12, but at least I can have a timer on me and kind of stick to that so we get to hear from Pasher as well. Okay, so let me share my screen and we'll go from there. Let's do this. And are you seeing my slides now full screen?
It says, oh yes, they're not full screen. It's,
okay,
maybe it's going to present mode.
Yeah, let me just do it this way because I didn't know if it would follow me. I'm just going to share the whole desktop. There we go.
Okay, and yes, now we can see full screen. Fantastic.
Okay, great. So once again, thank you, Yo, for the invitation. Very happy to speak for a few minutes on this project, and really with the hope that people will watch now, watch the recording, download the slides, etc. I'll have a link at the end. I tweeted about it. And I'll talk to you a little bit about this project, and it just happens to be related to the competition that Yo mentioned just a few minutes ago. So first, I think Yo gave a pretty good introduction. I'm at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York, where I've been here for actually 15 years, working first at the bench, but most of the time actually in the education side. So I work at the DNA Learning Center, where we do actually lots of hands-on biology education for students from middle school through high school. And I actually focus a lot on computational skills for both educators and also research investigators, which is sort of that middle icon, Cyverse, where that project, which I also work on as part of their education outreach and training, we really are trying to build the skill of researchers, and also in the case of the other parts of the project, actual platforms for people to use. I also have spent quite a bit of time volunteer-wise on the carpentries, which I hope many people are familiar with, as a global actually role model, I think, in terms of community of practice, which I'm going to talk about, but certainly another organization devoted to making sure that researchers have computational skills. So this was the original sort of condensation of the life sci trainers that I'm going to talk to you about, and a lot of things I've been working on the past, let's say, year and a half, 2 years, which is that no matter what type of training, what type of degree we have, the shelf life of all of our skills is just getting shorter. And I think if you're like me, you sort of feel this. Every time you wait 6 months, there's a new technique. Even in the things that you promised yourself you'd learn by now, those continue to elaborate, and it just becomes a thing of how do we actually keep up with all of these new skills that we need to learn. And this is not just an independent phenomenon. So here's a paper that we wrote a little while back where we asked investigators funded by the National Science Foundation here in the United States, what were their most unmet needs? So we, as a computational platform, this is from the Cyverse angle, wanted to know, do they need bigger clouds, or do they need fancier computers? But actually, it turned out that the #1 needs, in fact, the top 3 of the needs, that investigators felt that they weren't currently finding a way to meet were actually all on training. How to integrate multiple data types, how to look at data management metadata. So these things are directly related, actually, as it turns out, to InterMine, right? And also training on scaling analysis to cloud high performance and computing. I personally think that, it's kind of easy, let's say you're a funding agency or even an institution, to kind of count how many CPUs you've purchased and how many hard drives you've bought, and sort of quantify that, yes, we have capacity. But actually knowing and understanding whether training is meeting the needs of the investigators is a bit harder to quantify. There's a lot more to it. And so clearly there's a need there. There's some harsh realities, I think, that comes with training and thinking about how do we prepare investigators and even educators and students for the science and technology that we now have to face. So some harsh realities that interfere with that aspiration is that, one, we're always going to be behind. Technology changes quickly and the pace of that change is increasing. Now, what many people do is they might decide, well, I can brush up on my skills by taking a workshop, which brings me even closer to this topic of life-sci trainers, because as it turns out, if we want to catch up, one option might be to go back for a whole new degree, which very few people have the resources and time to do. You might be able to get a sabbatical, and again, it depends on the context, whether that's appropriate for you and whether you have the resources. So workshops, which are somewhat abundant, are out there. They're not perfect, but they're very practical, and they can actually be very impactful. However, it's not all the solution, because this paper and others, this one talking about the null effects of boot camps, shows that when you look at graduate students who are often a target of these workshops, and you say, well, my graduate students don't know how to use R. Let's make sure we have an R workshop at the beginning of every year. It sounds perfectly good. This is an extensive study published in Proceedings of the National Academy, and they looked at 294 students. I don't have time to go into the really depths of it, but they didn't ask them, how do you feel about your workshop, or do you think you're a good scientist? They did everything from analyzing their abstract submissions to looking at their sort of efficacy in the community. So it was really pretty detailed. And so as they looked at that and they went beyond previous surveys, they really found that even though millions of dollars are being spent on this, it's not really very effective. I was, as many in the community, intrigued by these results, but I did learn from many people on the education side that a lot of this stuff is actually well known outside of the context that I work in. And it really comes down to it being difficult to convey lots of information sustainably in a short amount of time, as we would have hoped workshops could do. So my third point is, it would be great if we could make workshops more effective, because they are much more accessible. So can we address some of the deficiencies to make sure that workshops are better? The idea being that short format teaching is not like semester-long learning. In a semester, even if you have a teacher that's not really the best teacher, eventually you can find your way through. You form a study group, you have time to read the book. But when you have a workshop instructor who may be very skilled in terms of their domain knowledge, and you ask them to compress that and deliver something in the course of a day or 2 days or a week, there's a lot of different concerns. I kind of think about it as a sort of the way that a caricature is able to convey a lot of information in a short amount of time. There's a famous quote from Picasso where he drew an image. I don't know if it's really this one, but he drew an image of somebody that was sort of a line drawing, and they were wondering, well, what makes this image worth, tens of thousands of dollars? It took you 5 seconds to draw it, and I'm paraphrasing here. His answer was, it didn't take me 5 seconds, it took me a lifetime. In other words, a skilled artist is able in a short amount of time to convey something because they've been so practiced of it. Normally when somebody gives a workshop, maybe they do it once a year, maybe they've never done it before. And so even if they were a university professor teaching for an extended amount of time, there really are some different concerns that we need to explore when it comes to improving workshop training. In our formal preparation, we're usually well guided. We can form support. There probably is a map in the form of a curriculum, but oftentimes in postgraduate learning, you're sort of on your own. There might be a map, but it might not even be written for you. And there's a lot more at stake because you're not centered as a learner whose full-time job is learning. You're probably a researcher, an educator, you have a lot of things going on. And so it's even more costly if you spend your time taking the wrong workshop or learning things that you actually didn't really need to focus on. So I do think that there's hope, and I think that hope always comes out of community. And for me, this is really the most important equation, that community equals sustainability. If we can form communities around these problems, around these issues, I think we can tackle it. And I've learned this really from software carpentry, data carpentry, and many of the other projects that I've been associated with. So I was sitting in a meeting, not paying attention, and then I thought to myself, hey, everybody's got Slack. Everybody's able to sort of link themselves. Why don't we do this? So I announced it in a tweet in November 2018. Currently, we have more than 300 members on that Slack from 20 countries. I haven't done the current count, but it's thousands of messages that Slack tells me have been exchanged. We had our first global call in April 2019. There's another one coming up in February. These are shorter ones, but there's a reason for it. Actually, it's linked to our steering committee, which just started in fall 2019. You can check the website. But we are in the early stages of putting together our code of conduct, our governance documents. And so we're going to have short community calls in February, which anyone who is a life-sci trainer can attend, just to give feedback on those documents. And then we hope to have longer calls very shortly after that, because if you do training, it's not like you are a professional or that particular aspect of your life is not professionalized in the sense that there's not a conference for people who do training in short format. There's not a journal for that. And so we have to create our own space and our own mechanisms to share our ideas and also get credit for it. In fact, as I mentioned, the idea of the community of practice is that we want to work together and learn together. And it's really not just a squishy, soft, feely concept, but it's actually well used in many disciplines outside the sciences. So the goals and the vision of the project are to promote individual trainers, give them a voice. People can post a biography, have a place, be part of a community, have a face, and really give them credit for the work that they do. We want to promote and develop community standards so that learners who attend workshops by somebody who's affiliated with this community can come to trust that those workshops are going to be at a certain level and deliver a certain level of inclusiveness. We want to keep the organization dynamic and lightweight, so we don't want to have endless committee meetings and drag people into yet another thing, but we want to engage people where they are at and not make too many demands in their times, but yet give them a place and a resource to reach out to when they'd like to interact. And also to connect across institutions, organizations, and continents. There are some groups of people who do training, like in Elixir, for example, that's international, but it's still focused on Elixir, so we wanted to make something that's even broader than that. And finally, the ultimate goal is really to accelerate scientists by, and if we do that, we believe we'd accelerate the science. I've got 1 minute left on my timer, which brings me to just about my last slide. This is a competition that NSF started about a year ago too. In fact, I formed life-sci trainers after entering the competition and writing an essay, which I wrote in a hotel room in Amsterdam. But NSF is the big funder of basic research in the United States. And so they have this thing currently called 10 Big Ideas. So if you write any funding proposal to NSF, almost certainly anything you write must be aligned to one of these 10 big ideas. Some of them are things like unlocking the data revolution or understanding the rules of life. So there's different ones that you could align your project with. And they said, well, let's have a competition and open it up to researchers and the public. Tell us what the next set of big ideas should be. And so I entered a competition with this theme called Reinventing Scientific Talent, which you can read about. But essentially, it's the nucleus of what I've just described over this call. And as of yesterday, NSF has already come out with funding opportunities where we can elaborate on those. So it'll be transfer collaboration. I'll be talking about it, where they're right now starting with forming conferences around these ideas and early concept grants. And we can apply for those now and actually get some money to take these ideas to the next level. So with that, there is a link to the slides or QR code if you're handy with your phone. But I really love this quote because I think it encapsulates what we're trying to do. We have to be able in this century to learn, unlearn, and relearn in order to be successful. So with that, I'll hand it back to Yo. And if there are opportunity for questions or things like that, I apologize. I'm going to leave about a quarter to 1 for another meeting. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason. That was actually really interesting. I sort of thought I might half know what this was about, but I really loved the way you presented the problem there, and then said, and here's what I'm doing to fix it. And I also loved the comment you had about the lightweightness. So let's not make this another wieldy, an unwieldy, difficult, lots of work organization.
That's the plan.
So folks, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add the, lost it, there we go, yep. So if you hop down to where Jason has added his slides, you can add your name and any questions you may wish to add. Or if those pop up later, you can also add them later and I'll make sure they get followed up and passed on to Jason if needed. Or it's also fine to unmute yourself and ask any questions you may have now.
Yep, and if you don't catch me here, my Twitter handle is there, or you can email me. I will put my email address up there, and happy to share this as broadly as we can. It's really not designed to be an all-consuming activity, so people can join and interact at the level that they like. But sharing it is great, so that if you know somebody in your life who does something like this, we'd love them to come and be a part of the community.
If no one else has, I have one question, Jason. I should be signed up to this for some of my non-work life science training initiatives, shouldn't I?
We'd love to have you, of course.
Right. I will find you there. Also, let me know when those calls are, because I would love to participate.
Yes, there's 2 calls. One of them designed for one hemisphere, one of them designed for the other. I think they're the last 2 Fridays in February. So I will circulate that information as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so as I mentioned, feel free to throw any questions into the agenda, or Jason has added his email address just there. Also follow him on Twitter. It is a fantastic ride. But we will move on. So Pasher, he has recently taken over ThaleMine, which previously was run by Airport, but now Pasher is managing that, actually based in Toronto. So Pasher, are you there and ready?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so I'll start. Can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, I guess that. So my name is Pasher and I am from Bioanalytic Resource. So the BAR is one of the largest plant biology resources in Canada. So the first BAR paper was published in 2005. So we are based in University of Toronto. We have our own servers. We don't use cloud or any virtualization. So it's basically running bare metal. So the bar is free to access at bar.utoronto.ca. You don't need any subscription or any passwords to access it. So we have several resources. These include gene expression data collected from various research papers, protein-protein interactions, protein-DNA interactions, protein structures. These data are stored in a database in MySQL databases, and they are served using web services to web applications which are hosted on the bar. Our most popular tools are EFP browser, ePlant, and Arabidopsis interactions viewer. We also have an interactions viewer for rice. So this is the landing page of the bar. So Araport started in around 2013 under the leadership of Professor Chris Town at JCVI. So it was supposed to be a centralized resource for all Arabidopsis information and data. Other participating institutes were Texas Advanced Computing Center, and University of Cambridge, which provided InterMine. So the InterMine later became their InterMine instance was called ThaleMine, and the airport.org front page was made in Drupal 7. So they also had an app store on airport.org where scientists can contribute to apps that share their data they publish along with their research papers. So you can basically write your own app, host data, and share the data. So they also had JBrowse, and with the funding, they also started to uh, re-annotate Arabidopsis genome, which was Araport 11. So from tier 10, they were going to Araport 11 genome. So they had a single sign-on for all Araport resources. So you sign on to Araport and you are signed into ThaleMine, JBrowse, and App Store. So all the data was provided using the REST API. So they also participated in community outreach. They had workshops and they attended conferences. So in 2013, the bar also got funded to contribute to Araport. So for that, we provided several gene expression databases used by bar EFP browser. So we also attended the first Araport workshop in November 2014. So it was a workshop about app development. So the first app that we developed became the first community app ever published on airport.org. It was a interactions viewer. So basically we took the interactions on the bar and made a little Cytoscape JS viewer and hosted it on Airport. And we learned a lot of things and we contributed back to Airport. So over the next few years, we contributed several apps and ePlant was our biggest contribution. So back when Airport was funded, this was the landing page. As you can see, there is link to ThaleMine, JBrowse, App Store, and then later on the bar ePlant was added. And it has the news and job postings. I was told that the job postings page was the most popular page on Airport. So how did it go? We received a phone call in 2016 from Professor Chris Down. He informed us that Airport has lost all its funding and almost everyone was gone. They will have to, they were let go. So we decided to push the ePlant app. Back then, it was only running on our bar server. So I rushed and published ePlant on airport.org and they applied for new funding using ePlant as proof of concept. So they basically said that ePlant works, so it means that the pipeline for science apps works at least in proof in principle because ePlant was the most complicated app we ever ported. If that worked, simpler apps will work too. Unfortunately, application for new funding failed. So what now? We assemble a team of researchers and call it Future of Airport team from JCVI, TAP, BAR, NCGR, TAIR. So the first meeting of the team was held in March 2019. The official news of loss of funding came just before that. I think it was December 2018. In that meeting, it was decided that the bar will get ThaleMine, TAIR will get JBrowse, NCGR contributed to GCV, and everything else was deprecated. So the new front page now looks like this, and we have links to legacy stuff which might not be running anymore. And we have the new URLs and everything, and a little story about what happened. So when we received ThaleMine, we noticed a few problems. So it wasn't maintained since I think 2017. It was the time when Vivek, who was the original developer of ThaleMine, left. It was based on the old InterMine infrastructure, which was version 1.8.5. So basically, the way airport staff are working, they were taking the data, modifying it slightly, making some minor things, and then writing their custom loaders and displayers and loading it into database. And some, I think they ran out of time, but some InterMine core changes and biosource changes that were supposed to go upstream, so they didn't have time or funding to contribute it upstream. It seems like it was difficult to upgrade from 1.8.5 to, at the time, 2 or even 3.1.2, which was the latest at the time we got ThaleMine. And on top of those problems, we have our own problems. We had no funding specifically for ThaleMine. We had other funding projects, but then ThaleMine would have to, we would have to basically volunteer for ThaleMine. So to organize, we follow these simple rules, which are based on Unix philosophy. We keep things simple, as simple as possible. We want to maintain minimum lines of code and contribute as many changes to InterMine as possible. We follow the principle of least astonishment. So test, test and deploy every minor release of InterMine. So if anything goes wrong, we know that the changes that went wrong in bar ThaleMine were contributed in the past 2 or 3 months, and we only have to go back up to maybe 100 or so commits to debug it. So we also clarify things a little. Instead of writing scripts to modify the data and then load the data using the loader, we skip the modifications part. So if we have bugs, we only have to debug the loader and not both the loader and the scripts that load and the scripts that modify the data. So we are cutting our debugging work to half. And we are building for the near future, which is Java 11, Tomcat 9. We test it on developing servers and Debian 10 and everything. We follow the rule of parsimony, which is that if nothing else works, we write loaders. So we decided to port ThaleMine, port ThaleMine to bar. Our initial attempts were just to build Port ThaleMine as is, which obviously failed. Debugging was very, very difficult, and we were new in Java. We just learned Java. So we decided to start from scratch using MakeMine. So this MakeMine script came with the version 3.1.2 of InterMine. We got our inspiration from InterMine documentations, HumanMine, FlyMine, and loader. We tried loaders from Port ThaleMine. We got most of them working. We pushed as many changes possible to upstream InterMine, which you might look at the InterMine history and you can see our pull requests. So far, we got version 4.1.2 working, and the data set is from January 27th, 2020. We pushed ThaleMine and ThaleMine biosources to GitHub. So if you look at the project XML file, you can see where the data is coming from and how we downloaded and what we downloaded and what we did. So basically, based on that project XML file, you can and you should be able to build the entire ThaleMine on your desktop or server. If you don't, it means that we got it wrong somewhere, and we need to make it as portable as possible and send a pull request or create an issue, and so we can look at it. So here is the landing page of what's working. So it's bar.utoronto.ca/ThaleMine. So these are some data sets that we got working. So basically, this is genomics data, proteome, and whatever we can get to work. And if you click on the source link, it will download a file that was actually present. No modifications were made, just the file as is downloaded, and loaders were run, and ThaleMine was built. So there are some plans for future. So we need to upload Rapport strains. So there's a recent paper, I think it's not published yet, but we can wait for it to publish. So there are 6 strains of Rapport that are being published, Arabidopsis, sorry, that are being published. And we have the gene expression data, Rapport 11, which was from RNA-seq project. And we have Salk data, we have gene histories, and we also have Thayer custom. So Thayer has their own annotations project. We also want to load those annotations. And there are some minor issues that I'm still working on, which are bugged in the live. There's a bug in the live ThaleMine. So the web properties service is not working. It could be the issue with the Java 11 or Tomcat 11. And I think the issue is in the genomics regions part. Java thinks that we are providing it with a string, but we are actually providing it with a map, and the web service, the web property service does not work, which affects BlueJeans front end. I think BlueJeans need to read this file. I am thankful to the Future of Airport team, and I think we did get some funding from University of Toronto, which was for initial RA funding after we started work on the ThaleMine. And we also had some funding from, I think it was Blake Myers, Professor Blake Myers, NSF travel funding, which allowed us to go to InterMine, Future of Airport meeting. And we are thankful to JCVI staff, Eric, and their staff, and especially Vivek. He has always been there to help us. And most importantly, InterMine staff, Yo is awesome, and everyone else who read my pull requests. And if you have questions, you can ask me or maybe just write it in the document. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Questions?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Pasher.
No problem.
Mm-hmm. So I had one small comment. I loved the simple rules that you adopted for the development of the new ThaleMine. I didn't actually realize it had been completely built back up from the ground again, but the rules that you had for simplicity to make it maintainable sound like a really good development, what's the word I'm looking for? Philosophy in general. I thought that was really nice.
Yes, these are the rules that are, I think these are called the Unix philosophy. And it's very popular. It's Eric Raymond's book. It's the first chapter or something.
I feel like I should know it as an open source nerd, but unfortunately I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, hey Manish, you had something you wanted to say?
Yes, I had actually one question for Asher here.
Yeah.
Well, after I've gone through the code base of InterMine and went through whole process about how the database is being made, I wanted to know how actually or how much time did you invest in building it from scratch? And as you said that you are implementing the Unix philosophy, so keeping in mind all these things, how much time did you invest?
I think I have to start Java from scratch, so I needed to learn Java first. So that's about 2 months of 1 month or 2 months of reading Java books. And then once I figured out Java and then I read the documentations and started working on the loaders, which were usually spending about a week on a loader and figuring out how things work. So it was difficult because ThaleMine had custom loaders which had the same name as InterMine's base loader. So if you go to our Git repository, there is a Uniprot loader, which is almost the same name as InterMine's loader. But when you run those loaders, the InterMine loaders doesn't shows the protein names on the front page, but the bar ThaleMine and Airport ThaleMine does shows it. So to get that loader working, I got the InterMine loader working, but then the Future of Airport meeting said that we had a different loader, try that. So I figured that out. So yeah, it depends on the loader. If the loader works, it's easy. If not, then it takes like a few days. And then I had the bar responsibilities too, so it took some time.
Well, amazing effort. Like I understand, it takes so much amount of effort. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay, looks like that might be it. So thank you so much, Asher, for sharing. That was really good. And yes, building a whole new InterMine when you haven't actually learned Java, that sounds like it was quite a big thing to take on. So amazing job in that case. And also, thank you so much for all the pull requests you have been making so far. That has really been making such a help.
Thanks. I guess I'll mute now if there is no more questions.
Okay, so I have a couple of other quick things I just want to mention on the call, and then I will set you all free. So just a few current and upcoming events. So one right now, we actually have a couple of visitors from France and from Italy, actually via Elixir, who are in the office, both working on creating their own InterMine from data they've brought with them. So I think that's a sort of a nice exchange program you may be thinking of doing more in the future. If anyone like knows someone who has some data who wants to come and visit for a short while, definitely ping us and we can see if we can arrange to get another sort of staff exchange running. And the other thing I was just wondering, and I don't know if anyone knows at this point in time yet, but who's attending BCC 2020 in Toronto? Hopefully we'll see you, Pasher.
Yes, I'll be in Toronto.
Yeah.
I think it's at University of Toronto, I think.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
like 5 minutes walk away.
Excellent. You need to come to this conference.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll be there. We've actually submitted some InterMine training. So assuming that gets accepted, we may be doing some workshops in Toronto. And I think, is it July this year? So, or maybe late June.
See you there.
Excellent, excellent. And the only other thing I briefly wanted to mention from the InterMine side was summer internships are coming, which is always one of my most favorite times of the year. So previously it's always been Google Summer of Code. This year we are also doing Outreachy, which is designed to promote diversity in open source tech. So Outreachy recruits exclusively from underrepresented backgrounds. But otherwise is very similar to Google Summer of Code. And this is something that's been enabled by the Wellcome Trust. So we were actually awarded a small grant from the Wellcome Trust specifically for diversity and inclusion related issues. So yeah, we'll be looking forward to that. So if anyone on this call is interested in an internship, either as a student or via Outreachy, then feel free to chat with me or look at some of the project ideas. If you are interested in mentoring or learning about mentoring, or perhaps you have some sort of InterMine related idea you've always wanted to see that might have a 3-month scope for an intern to program, then we're also interested in hearing about those ideas so that we can maybe take them forward further with you. So my email address is actually just there at the bottom of the agenda if anyone wants to chat anything about that, or I'm also available at chat.intermine.org on our Discord channel. Although I would suggest tomorrow because it's nearly home time in the UK at least. And apart from that, our next call will be a techie-oriented call. We will be discussing the most recent InterMine release. And also Kevin, who works on Blue Jeans, the new InterMine interface, will hopefully be doing a demo on the how do I phrase this? Easy install for InterMine data visualizations. So rather than having to configure your JSP displayers like you might have in your old InterMine, in the JSP InterMine, it's basically just a few clicks from someone who's logged in as a super user. So we're aiming to make administering InterMine a lot easier. And it's really quite nifty. And I would also like to open a small discussion around federating result sets across different InterMines. So hopefully there's quite a few interesting discussions for the next call. I think those are all the updates I have. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to say or ask at the minute. I'll leave an awkward silence for a moment. Okay, all good. So it's been lovely to have you here. I will end the recording. These recordings will be processed and then I'll post them online. And I want to make a huge, huge thank you both to Pasha for sharing about ThaleMine's history and its current status, and also to Jason for talking about life-sci trainers. So thank you both.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye. Bye.
Okay, bye all.
Take care.